The rain hit the rusting iron fire escape like a drumroll for my collapse. I crouched beneath the flickering neon sign of an abandoned motel in East LA, the hem of my designer trench soaked, fingers trembling as I dialed the number I swore I'd forget. My breath ghosted in the cold. Behind me, the city groaned. Sirens in the distance, a dog barking, the buzz of something always slightly broken. He picked up on the third ring. "I can't breathe," I whispered, voice hoarse. "I can't live this lie anymore." A pause. Not hesitation, just that quiet strength in him, like he was building his words brick by brick. Then burn it down, Margaret. That was Jeffrey, always cutting through the noise. Always seeing me, not the curated image, not the gold-plated last name. Just me. But that moment? That wasn't the beginning. The beginning was uglier. Growing up in that marble tomb of a mansion in West Hollywood, I learned early that silence was currency. My mother, Nicole Condi, wore perfection like armor. My father, the empire-building titan behind Condi Industries, wore it like a noose for everyone else. Second best is failure dressed in pearls, he used to say. He never raised his voice. He didn't have to. His disappointment was colder than any punishment. I was raised like a product, not a daughter. Polished, market-ready. Harvard Business. Executive track. Engaged to Brandon, the merger in a tuxedo. He kissed my cheek like he was shaking hands on a deal. But I smiled. I always smiled. The dutiful daughter, perfect fiancé, future CEO. No one saw the rot beneath the gold. No one but Jeffrey. We met in the kind of place my mother would have dry-heaved at, a cracked asphalt lot outside a garage near the shipyards, heavy with grease and seagull cries. My Ferrari had choked halfway there, engine dead, like it knew something I didn't. He pulled up in a battered tow truck, stepped out like a scene from a different life, jeans, oil-stained hands, flannel shirt open at the neck. "Looks like your car hates you," he said with a grin. "Or maybe it's trying to set you free." His eyes weren't kind. They were honest. Raw. Like he'd seen through every mask I'd ever worn. I could have called a driver. I didn't. Instead, I sat on a cracked stool in his cluttered garage, sipping bitter coffee from a machine older than me, listening to him talk about machines like they had souls. "Office jobs suffocate me," he said once, wiping his hands on a rag. "I like fixing things I can touch." "You ever feel like your life doesn't belong to you?" God, that hit like a slap. I didn't answer. I think I cried instead. The rest blurred. Clandestine dinners in dive bars, wind-whipped drives through canyons at midnight, hiding out in his dim apartment that smelled of motor oil and vanilla candles. Not romantic, not perfect, but real. 8 months I lived a double life. He never asked me to choose. That was the thing. He just looked at me like I already had. The explosion came at a gala, our mansion glittering like Versailles, violinists sawing out something dead and beautiful. My mother's voice sliced through champagne air. "After the wedding, Margaret will take over our East Coast operations." Applause. Smiles. My fiancé's cold fingers tightening around mine like a chain link. Inside, I was screaming. I excused myself. I didn't walk. I escaped, heels clacking against stone as I fled into the garden, heart beating like a war drum. That's where I called Jeffrey. That's where I fell apart. That's where I decided to live. I didn't leave in a storm of rage or fury. I left quietly at dawn, the mansion's silhouette bleeding into the smog. One suitcase. A note. My mother would call it a tantrum. My father wouldn't call at all. Jeffrey would send a lawyer. But I wasn't theirs anymore. I stood outside my father's study one last time, the door looming like a vault. My hand trembled on the brass handle. My breath hitched. I didn't knock. I turned and walked away. Not toward a man. Not toward freedom. Toward the woman I'd buried long ago. The real me, finally exhaling. The room hadn't changed. Same leather chairs, same cigar haze clinging to the air like a warning. My heels echoed too loudly on the cold stone floor. My father didn't look up at first, just kept scribbling notes, his pen a sharp staccato against silence. Then he spoke without looking. "If you're here to ask for something, make it quick." "I'm not here to ask," I said, voice thinner than I wanted. "I'm here to tell you. I won't marry Jeffrey." His pen stopped. A beat. Then another. He slowly raised his head, and I felt the weight of decades behind his eyes. "Excuse me, I'm in love with someone else." For a split second, the silence was surgical, too clean. Then it shattered. He shot to his feet, chair screaming back against the hardwood, fists clenched at his sides. "You're leaving a legacy for what? A damn grease monkey? My daughter throwing her bloodline into the gutter over some back alley dropout. He's an engineer," I snapped, fists clenched behind my back to stop them shaking. "Smarter than half your boardroom. Kinder than you'll ever be." My voice cracked, but I didn't. He slammed his fist down, papers flying like startled birds. "You walk out that door, Margaret, and it's over. No trust. No title. No seat at my table. You'll be nothing." And finally, that small, tired smile broke across my face. "Not bitter, free. Then I guess I'll find my own table." I turned. I didn't wait for the usual control tactics, the gaslighting, the threats, the guilt masquerading as love. I walked out, and the house, my childhood fortress, cracked behind me like glass under heel. My mother sobbed theatrically on the staircase, pearls askew. Staff whispered in corners, pretending not to stare. But no one stopped me. No one ever did when the doll stopped dancing. Jeffrey's apartment sat in a crumbling brick building wedged between a pawn shop and a laundromat that never slept. No elevator. Just stairs steep enough to question your resolve. He opened the door before I knocked. Eyes wide. Hair messy. Hands oil-stained. "You came," he whispered. I dropped the suitcase and threw myself into him. His arms wrapped around me like armor. "Are you sure?" he asked into my hair. "This. Everything you had, your life." "I never had it," I said, voice muffled against his chest. "It was on loan. This is mine." Those first months weren't magical. They were real. The kitchen's sink leaked. The walls were thin. My job at a small consultancy paid less than my handbag once had. But we laughed over instant noodles. We argued about laundry. We fell asleep tangled on a mattress without a frame, and I'd never felt richer. My parents tried everything. Froze my accounts. Had lawyers send thinly veiled threats. Tried to poison my new job with whispered connections and backroom calls. It didn't work. Every attack only sharpened my spine. When Jeffrey proposed, it wasn't with a ring. It was a note on a napkin passed across a diner table at 2 a.m. "What do you say we stop surviving and start living?" I said yes between bites of greasy hash browns. We married in a sun-bleached park nestled between a skate ramp and a broken carousel. My dress cost less than a silk scarf I once lost at a country club. There were folding chairs. A grill. Laughter. Real faces, not mask wearers and pearls. I walked barefoot down the aisle, heart pounding. And then the text. "Your father and I will be attending. One last chance to fix this mistake." My chest tightened. I showed it to Jeffrey. His thumb brushed mine, gently. "Whatever you decide," he said softly. "I'm here." They arrived late. My mother's heels sank into the grass. My father stood behind her, jaw clenched, arms crossed. They didn't smile. They didn't speak. They didn't move. I didn't stop the ceremony. They watched as I said vows under an open sky to a man with dirt under his nails and sunlight in his eyes. And when it was over, they stood among the folding chairs, porcelain figures in a world too vivid for them. During the reception, simple food, paper plates, music from a portable speaker, my mother cornered me beneath a tree strung with dollar store lights. "Margaret, darling," she said, voice cracking under the weight of years. "Come home. We'll pretend this didn't happen." I turned slowly. Jeffrey was helping a little girl pour soda into a plastic cup, his shirt untucked, laughter in his eyes. Friends were dancing barefoot on the grass, arms tangled together, free. The sky stretched above us, endless, blue, merciful. "I am home," I said. She opened her mouth to respond, but for once had nothing to say. "It's not too late," my father hissed, voice low but lethal. "Jeffrey would still take you back. You don't understand what you're throwing away." He didn't disguise his contempt. He never had to. His words were laced with the same venom he'd once used in boardrooms to gut rivals. Only now it was aimed at me. "This is your last chance, Margaret. Stay with this person," he practically spat, like Jeffrey was filth clinging to his shoes, "and you'll never see a cent of your inheritance. You'll be crawling through life. Is that what you want? Poverty?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I turned, slow, deliberate, and let my eyes find Jeffrey across the park. He stood under a string of cheap lights, surrounded by friends. A paper plate sagged in one hand, overloaded with ribs and corn. His tie was crooked, hair mussed, suit slightly too big, and he'd never looked more like home. He laughed, throwing his head back, his whole body leaning into the sound. He didn't notice me watching. He didn't need to. Then I turned back to my parents, statues of money and regret, rigid in their $1,000 fabrics, standing amid picnic tables and plastic cups like ghosts of a world that never quite welcomed me. "What I want," I said, voice level, "is to wake up in a life I don't have to pretend to want." My mother's lips trembled. My father's hands curled into fists. "Jeffrey makes me happy," I continued, louder now. "And if that's not enough for you, then maybe you were never enough for me." His face darkened the same shade as the day I first said no to him. "You're no daughter of mine," he snapped, spinning on his heel. His footsteps were loud against the gravel, full of wounded pride and self-righteous rage. My mother lingered. For one long moment, her eyes locked with mine and softened. I thought she might speak, might reach for something real between us. But she only gave a tiny shake of her head, like dusting off a memory, and turned to follow her king back to his crumbling throne. Jeffrey slid beside me as the silence settled like ash. His arm wrapped around my waist, grounding me. "You okay?" he whispered. I leaned into him, the weight of everything falling away. "Never better." And I meant it. That was 8 months ago. Since then, we carved out something small and fierce, a life stitched together with love and defiance. Jeffrey fixed engines by day and chased his dream by night, working toward his master's in mechanical engineering like a man on fire. I built a modest client list at a boutique consultancy, surviving on brains instead of bloodlines. Our apartment was tiny. Second-hand furniture. A stove that groaned every time we turned it on. But it was ours. And in that small space, I found more joy than in all 29 rooms of my father's mansion. Until everything started to shift. It began like a whisper. Jeffrey came home late. Answered calls in the other room. Started hiding his phone, brushing off questions with half-smiles. "Just garage stuff," he'd say, kissing my forehead. Nothing big. But I felt it. The distance. The hollow notes in his voice. The secret behind his eyes. Was I losing him? Was I repeating the cycle I'd bled to escape? Friday night, I came home early, heart full and hands full. Thai takeout, our favorite. I imagined the night. Pad Thai, a dumb movie, bare feet tangled on the couch. But the apartment was quiet. Dark. A single note on the counter, scrawled in that familiar, sloppy handwriting. "Working late at the garage. Love you." But my gut clenched. I called him. Voicemail. Tried again. Voicemail. The air felt thick. Electric. Wrong. Grabbing the keys, I drove to the garage. The streets were slick with rain, headlights smeared like brushstrokes across the windshield. I pulled up. Dark. Closed. No sign of his truck. No sign of him. I called again, voicemail. Then, my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. The message. "Mrs. Lewis. Come to 1920 Santa Monica Boulevard. Urgent. It's about your husband." I stared at the screen. My heart lurched. That part of town was industrial, cold, and sterile. Not his usual route. Not our world. I punched the address into the GPS with shaking fingers and drove through the sleeping city like it was a maze of ghosts. The building loomed out of the darkness like a shadow, glass, steel, and silence. A fortress. No sign, no logo. Just a black tower rising out of concrete like something meant to be forgotten. As I pulled in, the front gate opened on its own. A man in a gray uniform approached the car, expression unreadable, movement sufficient. "Mrs. Lewis," he said, voice clipped, eyes scanning me like data. "Please park here. Take the executive elevator to the top floor." The top floor? My throat went dry. This wasn't a garage. This was something else. What was happening? Each step across the marble floor felt like walking into a dream I hadn't been invited to, or maybe a trap I couldn't escape. The elevator sealed behind me with a soft hiss. Ahead, silence. Opulence. Power. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city like a glittering sea of secrets. The air smelled of ozone and cold ambition. Polished black stone. Sleek leather. A quiet hum of machinery buried in the walls. It felt nothing like the world Jeffrey and I had built. And yet, there he was, standing like he belonged there. Not Jeffrey in worn jeans, not the man who smelled like motor oil and cinnamon coffee. No, this man wore a suit that caught the light like armor, cut sharp enough to draw blood. His hair was slicked back, his shoulders squared, hands calm, waiting. But the moment our eyes met, I saw him. My Jeffrey. The man who let me cry in his garage at midnight and held my trembling hands without judgment. "Margaret," he said gently, stepping forward. I blinked, unable to form words. "What is this?" He smiled. "Just barely. This was supposed to be a surprise," he said. "I wanted to wait until I was sure. Until I could give you this moment, and it would mean something." He gestured behind him, to the sleek desk, the skyline, the glass empire stretching toward the stars. "I sold the patent," he said quietly. "The battery system I've been building for years. Someone believed in it. Really believed. They funded the company. Named me CEO." My lips parted. But nothing came out. "I didn't keep it from you to lie," he added, voice softer now. "I didn't want you to think I was trying to earn you. You already made me feel like I was enough." I stepped toward him, heart slamming against my ribs. "You were always enough," I whispered, voice cracking. He reached for me, and just as our hands met, the doors burst open. The sound cracked the moment wide open. 3 figures stood framed in the glass like a storm had arrived. My father, red-faced, thunder-browed, chest heaving. My mother, poised but pale, pearl necklace trembling against her collarbone. And Jeffrey, smug and cologne-soaked, as if he still hadn't realized the game had changed. "What the hell is going on?" my father boomed, his voice bouncing off the glass. "Security said Margaret came up here. What is she doing in the CEO's office?" His eyes locked on Jeffrey, sharp, feral. "You're just a mechanic." Jeffrey didn't flinch. He calmly adjusted his cufflinks and walked around the desk. "No," he said. "I was a mechanic. Now I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Lewis Innovations." The words struck like a thunderclap. The silence afterward was thick and stunned. A moment stretched across a chasm of disbelief. My mother gasped, reaching blindly for the nearest chair to steady herself. Jeffrey's jaw went slack, hands twitching uselessly at his sides. But my father, he just stared. Hollow, like a general who suddenly realized the war had already been lost. But my mother managed, voice barely above a whisper, "You were fixing cars." Jeffrey's voice didn't waver. "I was building a business. I started with a chain of repair shops. Grew them, sold them, used the money to fund research. Lewis Innovations isn't about wrenches and oil. We develop EV battery systems. Quietly, carefully, while the world wasn't watching." He turned to me, and for a heartbeat, the chaos fell away. "I wanted to build something real. Something worthy of you. But never because I thought I had to, because I wanted to. My chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow breaths. My brain couldn't keep up. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, barely hearing myself. His eyes never left mine. "Because I wanted you to fall in love with the version of me that had nothing. The one who couldn't offer you a single thing but his truth." I stepped forward. Slowly. "You idiot," I said, tears rising. "I didn't fall for your future. I fell for your heart." Then I was in his arms, and the rest of the world, the gasping, gaping faces behind us, didn't matter anymore. Jeffrey's gaze locked with mine, and what I saw in it wasn't pride, it was truth. Quiet, unwavering truth. "Because I needed to know," he said, voice low, raw. "When we met, I'd just landed on Forbes 32 under 32. My inbox was full. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Everyone suddenly wanted a piece of me, women included. But not for me. For what I had." He paused, just for a breath. "But you loved me when you thought I was broke. When I had grease under my nails and a beat-up truck. You left everything for me. Everything." I had to know it was real. My eyes burned. Not from sadness, but from how deeply and clearly he had seen me. Chosen me. Behind us, my father paced like a wolf that just realized the prey had teeth. He was muttering under his breath, trying to process what he had missed, what he had lost. "Lewis Innovations," he finally said aloud, almost to himself. "You're the one. The battery tech company. The one shaking up the entire EV market. Every auto giant is trying to get in." Jeffrey gave a small nod, unbothered. "We closed a Series C last month. Valuation, $50 billion. He let the silence hang for just long enough to sting. "Not quite Condi Industries," he added with a smirk, "but we're catching up." I couldn't help it. I laughed, full and fierce. All those years of them looking down on him, on us, and he'd been building an empire right under their noses. But Jeffrey wasn't finished. He turned toward my parents. His voice was calm, but the undertone was razor-sharp. "And while we're discussing legacy," he said, "I want to talk about how you treated your daughter. The woman you belittled, bullied, tried to break." My father opened his mouth, but no sound came out. "She is now," Jeffrey continued, "one of the largest shareholders in Lewis Innovations. The day she married me, I made sure of it. She doesn't just stand beside me, Mr. Condi. She owns a piece of what I've built." My father paled, the full weight of the miscalculation slamming into him like a freight train. "You always told me a Condi never settles for second best," I said, my voice rising like a fire catching wind. "Well, I didn't. I married a man who saw me, who respected me, who built something with me, not over me." There was no comeback. Just silence. And then, the one twist I hadn't expected. My mother stepped forward, her eyes rimmed in tears. "Margaret," she said quietly, arms half raised, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to embrace me anymore. "We were wrong." She glanced around the gleaming office, then back at Jeffrey, then finally at me. "We see that now. Please come home." Home. That word hit like an echo from another lifetime. I looked around, the polished floors, the silent luxury, the stunning view of a city I had once dreamed of owning. And then I looked at Jeffrey, the man who had held my hand in the dark when the world rejected me, the man who never once made me feel small. "I am home," I said softly. "But if you want to be part of our lives again, it's on our terms now. No more games. No more manipulation. Just honesty." My mother nodded, lips trembling. My father looked like he'd swallowed a nail. "And what about Condi Industries?" he muttered. "Are we just cut off?" Jeffrey's smile was razor clean, smooth as silk. "We've had offers. Big ones. Your competitors want exclusivity." But he glanced at me and something warm passed between us. "Because of family, I thought we might talk, if you're willing to treat us as equals." That moment? That was the true earthquake. My father sat down. Not out of power, but because he had to. And for the next hour, Jeffrey and my father talked. Not as enemies. Not as overlord and servant, but as equals. At last. My mother spent the entire time quietly judging our apartment photos, horrified by the toaster and tragic lighting. She didn't waste a second before announcing we needed to move to a proper place. Jeffrey had vanished long before that, probably into the backseat of some black car, licking his ego like a wounded animal. Later that night, curled up together in our tiny apartment, no skyline, no chandeliers, just the hum of the old fridge and the creak of a second-hand couch, I turned to Jeffrey. "Why?" I asked softly. "Why stay here? The garage? This place? You could have anything." He looked at me like the answer had always been obvious. "This place," he said, pressing his forehead to mine, "reminds me who I was before the world saw me. And who I became because you did." He kissed my forehead. "The garage keeps me grounded. And this apartment? It's where we built something real. No legacy. No lies. Just love." I wrapped my arms around him, and in that moment, I knew. We didn't build a life in spite of the chaos. We built one through it. And we were just getting started. Tears rose before I could stop them. "I love you," I whispered, voice trembling with laughter and something deeper. "You sneaky billionaire." Jeffrey grinned, pulling me close. "I love you, Condi." And just like that, everything changed, but not the way fairy tales or headlines would have you believe. There was no grand estate, no private island, no fleet of cars. Just peace. We moved, yes, but not into a mansion with golden gates. Instead, we chose a house with creaky floorboards, wildflowers in the backyard, and a kitchen that caught golden morning light just right. It wasn't about size or status. It was about belonging. I took on a new role, director of the Aurora Foundation, Lewis Innovations' philanthropic branch. We focused on the ones who never got a seat at the table, young inventors, first-gen students, garage dreamers with calloused hands and brilliant ideas. I knew them. I was them once, just dressed differently. Jeffrey stayed grounded too. He still spent Saturdays at the old garage, sleeves rolled, laughter echoing, grease on his palms. But now he wasn't just fixing cars. He was teaching kids how to use a wrench and, more importantly, how to believe in their own hands. My parents surprised me. Mom still clings to pearls and whispers about trust funds and proper legacies. But she hugs longer now. Softer, with less pretense and more heart. And my father? He started showing up. At first to talk business, but lately, he stays for coffee. He and Jeffrey talk about combustion engines and 20th century philosophy like two war veterans who finally put their swords down. They're not quite friends. Not yet. But there's respect. And that's a start. And me? I finally understand what Jeffrey meant back then about living beyond the paper version of life. Because the real beauty? It was never in the billion-dollar office or the country club gala. It was in the little things. The clang of tools in a dusty garage. The hiss of cheap coffee brewing before sunrise. The quiet way his hand always finds mine when no one's watching. Love lives in the unpolished places. Now and then, we'll pass by the old apartment, the one with the crooked blinds and the stubborn door. Or we'll order from that tiny Thai place with the flickering neon sign. And in those moments, Jeffrey will glance at me, just for a second. The way he did back when I was just a runaway heiress in heels, and he was just a mechanic with magic in his hands. And I know beneath all the titles, the contracts, the valuations, were still the same. Margaret and Jeffrey. A Condi and a so-called nobody. Not chasing billions. Just building something better. Something that matters. Because in the end, love doesn't care about last names or legacy. Love only asks who you are when the world stops watching. And we are rich in the only way that truly lasts. We found each other. And that was more than enough.